Namaste and good afternoon. It's me, Madhav Devkota. I'm Philip Scholar, Nepal Open University. Today I'm going to give a short presentation on the topics called On Linguistic Aspect of Translation, written by Roman Jacobson. And this very presentation is assigned by our respected facilitators, Keshab sir and Pratima ma'am. First of all, let me begin from writer's short biography. Actually, Roman Jacobson was born on October 11, 1896 in Russia and died on July 18, 1982 at the age of 85 in the United States of America. Roman Jacobson, he was considered one of the pioneer of structural linguist of 20th century. Beside this, he was also known as the great formalist and literary theorist. Roman Jacobson, he was also one of the founders of a Frag Linguistic Circle and an influential intellectual of the 20th century with his remarkable contribution in the field of uh, linguistics. In the given essay on the linguistic aspect of translation, written in 1959, he mainly talks about three different types of translation and some aspect of translations, such as linguistic translations, linguistic aspect, cultural aspect, and creative aspect. On linguistic aspect of translation, we mainly discuss about how to generate a meaning. He believes that the meaning of the particular word is a linguistic phenomena, and it is associated with the linguistic and semiotic fact. Its argument is meaning lies with the signifier. Meaning lies with the linguistic verbal sign and not actually the signified, the object it referred to. Then, in his essay, the major concern of uh, Roman Jacobson was is to this was disprove Bertrand Russell's argument that one must know a word's reference or the things in itself in order to know its meaning. The point is, Roman Jacobson's argument is actually we don't understand the things in itself. Jacobson claims is that every individual, every people do have the capacity and ability to know and understand the words without seeing their reference at first. That means they understand the certain words uh, in a in another words. Those words which have only a linguistic sign must be understood with their uh, particular context. That it is the context that context define the meanings. For instance, the grammatical words like merely, because, and others. Such words we can understand in a particular context. While talking about the linguistic aspect of translations, I already mentioned that, already talked about how to generate the meanings, that the word or the meaning that is derived from signifier. And when the verbal code is excluded, the meaning of the word cannot be found. That means if you exclude or avoid the linguistic sign, linguistic verb, then we cannot able to generate the meanings. So the actual point is to learn a new words. Other verbal sign must be used to describe it. Other verbal sign or the words, they are very useful. They help to define the words. For instance, the words like heaven, hell, and nectar. To define such word, we can take help. We can borrow the other linguistic sign to explain and to understand the meanings of these words. The meaning of any linguistic sign is its translation into some other further alternatives sign. Now let me give examples. For example, no one can actually understand the word like seeds. To understand the meaning like seeds, we can place such words in a particular cultural context. Until and unless we place such word in the linguistic context, in the cultural context, we cannot able to generate the meaning. So the Roman Jacobson, the major concern is the translators should be always conscious. So it's not to interpret or misrepresent the cultural aspect. So it is the linguistic verbal sign that gives meaning to an object, that is translation. That is what I have already discussed about this point. So Roman Jacobson has distinguished the three types of translations. Firstly, intralingual translations. It is also called rewording. Then second one is interlingual translation, um, or translation proper. And finally, intersemiotic translation or transmutation. Let me define these three different types of translations one by one. First, what is intralingual translation then? That intralingual translation that actually takes place within the same language, within the same language. It is something like rewording. It is something like placing the meanings in different words in the same language. Similarly, in intralingual translations, the translator mainly focus on synonymous word. Using synonyms and similar verbal sign to describe the original word, as Jacobson believes one can either use another more or less synonymous word to resort to a circumlocution. What the Roman Jacobson here tries to explain is the translator can use synonymous word or the similar words to replace the other linguistic sign. For instance, uh, example, can you describe him? Can you depict him? In the this given sentence, the describe and depicts, they have quite similar meaning. In the same way, if you look at the next example, then Saurabh is celebrate, or Saurabh is a bachelor. That means celebrate and bachelor, they uh, almost give the same sense. Or we can, let me say, we can define intralingual translation is something like rewriting, rewriting between different varieties of the same language. As I already mentioned, that the translator can use the synonymous words, but at the same time, the translator should be conscious that no similar word give the exact meaning. So some of the people consider that intralingual translation is not the translation at all. Then let me move to the next types of translation, that is intralingual translations, or let me say translation proper. And this translation, intralingual translation, can be defined as an interpretations of verbal sign by means of some other language. Here, this let me say this kind of translation actually happens between two different languages. For example, we can translate the Nepali text into the English text, and English we can translate into Nepali. Or it is something, or it is the process of passing or transcending a linguistic barrier between two different language system. Here, the source language and the target language, they are different. And there is no full equivalence between the code units. That means when we translate the one text into another from source language to the target language, we cannot find the equivalent words that can exactly replace the uh, the language. So, translation from one language to another substitutes the message. The point is, the translator should always conscious that how to replace the one meaning rather than finding the word-to-word translation. That word-to-word translation some of the time is not possible. So the translator should focus on the sense, the sense aspect, and try to give justice towards the source language. For example, when we translate the text or the poem like Pagal as a lunatics, or Siriskuful as the blue mimosa, these are some of the examples of interlingual translation. Then the next one is intersemiotic translation, or it is also known as the transmutation. And this kind of translation can be defined as an interpretation of verbal sign by means of non-verbal sign system. So this intersemiotic translation is different than uh, than the two one. This is different than the first and the second types of translation. And it is also, intersemiotic translation is also called transmutation. Here, the translator pass the message from verbal to a non-verbal, or from one medium to another mediums. And these categories includes all kinds of translation. For example, uh, here in intersemiotic translation, the translator can translate a movie, uh, can be translated into a books. A book can be translated into a comics. A video games are translated into a TV series, and among several other possibilities. So again, the point is, the major aspect of this kind of translation is, instead of focusing on the word-to-word translation, the stress or the sense is given on sense is given over emphasis on the overall message that needs to be conveyed here. The sense is given importance, as I already mentioned, that the translators should uh, focus on sense rather than word-to-word translation. Thus, the translator, instead of paying attention to the verbal sign, more concentrates on the information that is to be delivered. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I expect a constructive suggestion from my instructor. Thank you. Thank you very much.